So I guess we're rolling then. So Democrats have ended the shutdown. What exactly does that mean? We're not exactly sure. I'll wait for some more people to join in. What's up? Don't dox me. How we doing? How we doing? Testing out some new streaming software here, so I'm kind of just seeing if it works. Occupy the Hill. Yeah, so it seems like this could turn into a seriously radicalizing moment for a lot of people in the Democratic base. People are very, very pissed off at Chuck Schumer and the other Democrats right now, as they should be. This was obviously inevitable, especially with the pressure mounting. You know, it was pretty clear that Democrats were going to be the ones who would respond to that pressure, and not Republicans don't care about that sort of thing. And if they can pass that pressure off to the Democrats, they're always going to do that. So my feeling is the fight is all but over when it comes to this bill, because they have essentially decided to push it through to where it's basically past the filibuster at this point. So there are more votes to be had, but those votes are going to be decided by people like what's his fucking name, the Speaker of the House and the Republicans in the House. So the filibuster is no longer a factor. And some people are saying that the filibuster is one of the main motivations, one of the reasons that Democrats felt urgency in order to end this shutdown. So it wasn't the, flights being grounded or flying conditions becoming more dangerous. It wasn't SNAP benefits being cut off and the legal, clusterfuck that is going to ensue because of that. It's because of the filibuster. The Democrats were motivated to end this shutdown and give away the only leverage they had only because of the filibuster. And in the House, they still will not seat the Democrat that hasn't been sworn in yet. I suppose they're probably going to have to do that because they're going to have to bring the House back in session in order to open the government. They have to pass a bill in the House in order to do it, which means all of those representatives are going to need to get back to Washington, D.C., which may be an issue because of travel, although probably won't be that big of an issue. And they're going to have to bring the House back in session and vote on a bill, which probably means that this Democrat is going to get sworn in. My understanding is that the mechanism to prevent that Democrat from being sworn in was the fact that the House wasn't in session. So bringing that back into, they're probably going to swear that Democrat in order to get this bill passed. So a lot of people are now talking about primaries in terms of, how to handle this going forward with the Democrats. And I'm not liking the threshold on the mouth moving here. Is that a little smoother? Yeah, so people are talking about primary season. I've even seen some people who are more on like the corporate Democrat side. People like, what's his name, Brian Tyler Cohen, are now talking about a robust primary season for Democrats, which is true. That is what's about to happen. A lot of these Democrats that voted to pass this in the Senate, which is what broke the filibuster, aren't up for re-election, including Chuck Schumer. I think Sheehan, however you say that, she was another one. And I think 6 of the Democrats that voted to pass this in the Senate are not up for re-election in 2026. Many of them are not up till re-election until 2028. Some of them are not up till re-election until 2030. So that was a part of the the calculus there, was that, you know, they can have people who are not basically at risk for. It's funny how even when it's a little cartoon head, people will still roast it. Y'all need a fucking job, dude. Let's be real. Health insurance is going to raise costs regardless, simply because they have an excuse to. Yeah, they always will. But it's more about the subsidies that are in the Affordable Care Act that are being cut by Republicans. So this is going to allow them to get rid of those subsidies. The subsidies are gone when it comes to the ACA, because part of this deal was that P. Diddy's in chat, everybody. Part of this deal was that they're going to get a voice, or they're going to get a vote on this I think in December. So, in other words, the Republican bill is going to go through as is, but they're supposedly going to get a chance to vote about the Affordable Care Act's subsidies specifically in December. Now, that was the thing that all they got was a guarantee, right? A handshake from the Republicans that we're going to do this. So, obviously, the Republicans are just going to about face on this. My understanding is there's no mechanism through which to make sure that it happens. And that's what people like Bernie Sanders have been saying since this whole shutdown thing happened, is that it's not enough to just take promises from the Republican Party, because they lie. That's what they do. So that's what's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. Because once this filibuster is broken and the government reopens, there's just no leverage that the Democrats have at all. The Republicans now go back to doing whatever they wanted to do. So, the other thing that is in this agreement that they made is agreement to fully fund SNAP, rehire government employees that were fired, reinstate them with back pay. Again, that's another thing that they don't actually have to do. They can just say they're going to do it, because all of this stuff has to get passed in later bills, and all the Republicans needed to do was get past this filibuster. Current go between Trump, Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe, don't dox me. Elaine, are you talking about Ghislaine Maxwell? Possibly. There's a lot of stuff coming out in that world. Also, the Virginia Joffrey, she wrote a biography or something. I think she wrote a book that's coming out now. And there's no names in it. You know, there's accusations made. There's things said, and people are kind of doing some investigating to figure out what these names are. But ultimately, there's no specific information. Shit's gonna hit the fan when Trump's tariffs are ruled illegal. That might happen, it might not. It's hard to know. It seemed like the Supreme Court was shifting their tone on that a little bit because of the election, and it became clear that public sentiment was shifting away from this idea of Trump's administration having sort of an infinite mandate. This could change that, because if the government is back opened, that's going to alleviate some of the pressure that was on the Republican Party, and I would imagine is going to allow them to get back to business in terms of, doing things like tariffs and allowing Trump to do whatever he wants. Mike Johnson won't seat the Arizona rep because he was told not to. Yes. But they're going to have to switch up on that because they're going to have to, as far as I understand, they're going to have to swear in that Democrat in order to pass through this bill and open the government. So that's now their first priority. We'll see how long that takes them. But it's no longer a question of Democrats negotiating because they don't need Democrats at this point to pass the bill. They needed Democrats to get past that filibuster blockade, and that has now been cleared. So seems to me that they're probably just going to swear in the Democrat and move on. That wasn't, as far as I understand, a measure of exercising leverage, although it could have been. And now that the fight's over, it doesn't matter anymore. I don't see a way that Mike Johnson could continue to not swear her in, although maybe he could. Yeah, Trump has absolutely been using the tariffs to get bribes. I think that's clear. And just that's how he works, you know. He asserts his leverage and you know, kind of uses it to get whatever he can in the meantime. So yeah, he's definitely been taking bribes from different companies or countries and, you know, trying to I think he's trying to establish a future for himself. Yeah, Cadillac, if you're referring to opening the House and swearing in the Democrat because they got what they wanted, I believe you're correct. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can keep not swearing in the Arizona House member, but I doubt it. I don't see how they can keep that going. So a lot of these Democrats that voted for it, like I said, they're not up for re-election. Yeah, and that's going to increase. The amount that people are paying per month for health care is going to increase. Republicans have no plan for that, and now they have no reason to pursue any plan for it because Democrats aren't fighting them on it anymore. So this was a terrible, terrible bill. Horrible idea to allow them to do this. Our agreement, I guess it's not technically a bill right now. And like I said, part of it was that they're going to reinstate people that Trump fired, not before the shutdown, but during the shutdown. And they're going to continue to fund SNAP. Here's the thing about that. Both of those are only things that happened because of the shutdown. So all Democrats have agreed to is a restoration of what conditions were before the shutdown, not even in relation to the one thing that caused them to pick this fight in the first place, which was the ACA subsidies being cut out of the Republicans' bill. So they have foregone that. The one demand that they had, which I was saying from the beginning, they should expand that to be a series of demands, but they're not even getting that because all it took was essentially the leverage that Trump asserted by saying, I'm going to fire all these people from Democrat programs and we're going to allow SNAP to be cut and all of that. That leverage worked. Trump utilized that leverage against the Democratic Party, and the Democrats caved because those were the things that were most important to them. And obviously that was a good use of his leverage because Democrats do care about those subsidies. But essentially they gave up the only leverage that they had and allowed those programs to be leveraged against them successfully. So it's exactly what Democrats should not be doing in power. And from here, the Democrats, yeah, right. He was going to do that anyway. And again, they're probably not even going to follow through on that. I do not see how there's anything concrete behind this because I believe the vote in the Senate was purely perfunctory. So maybe it's written into the final bill that those reinstatements have to happen and the back pay has to happen. Some of that stuff is a little bit obscure looking into it. It's never very clear what's actually in these bills and that sort of shit. But I would imagine that they are just going to find a way around that at some point too, because yes, they were just going to do it anyway. That's just what the Republican agenda is to cut people out of the federal government, cut employees and spending at all costs, especially at the expense of the poorest people. So Schumer did vote no. So essentially what happened is the caucus, enough Democrats in the Senate voted in favor of this bill to end the shutdown, so this agreement. So Chuck Schumer did not have to vote for it. So essentially, this agreement allowed for Chuck Schumer to be the one who put these different Democrats in place to get this bill through without he himself having to vote for it. And so that allows people to point to Chuck Schumer and for Chuck Schumer to say, well, I voted no on this because I didn't think it was a good idea, but all these other Democrats did. If Chuck Schumer wanted to stop those Democrats from voting for it, he could have, but he didn't. So it's a slick political way for Chuck Schumer to look like he didn't vote for this, even though he definitely allowed it to happen. This was definitely an agreement that Chuck Schumer had something to do with. But Senator King is not up for re-election until 2030. Tim Kaine is not up for re-election until 2030. Shaheen is not running again at all, so she's not vulnerable to a primary. Senator Hassan is not up until 2028. So that was essentially the plan, is they took some of the least vulnerable Democrats in the Senate, Democrats who are not vulnerable to primaries, and they use them as the sacrificial lambs to get this agreement passed. While people like Chuck Schumer and even Hakeem Jeffries is saying he's not in favor of this and was urging them not to do it, at least again publicly, because Chuck Schumer technically was doing the same thing. Tim Kaine was one of the people that voted yes, and he's defended his decision to do so too. Let me look it up. A lot of them are saying something along the lines of this is the best deal that we were going to get, and that waiting a little bit longer wouldn't have led to a better deal. I completely disagree with that. Tim Kaine put out a statement. He said there needs to be, in order to win his vote, there needed to be a path toward fixing Republicans' healthcare mess and protecting federal workers. He said this deal guarantees a vote to extend Affordable Care Act premium credits, which Republicans weren't willing to do. So guarantees a vote to extend Affordable Care Act premium credits. All that means is that Republicans are going to be forced to go on the record and say that they do not support these subsidies. Big fucking whoop. And again, that's if this vote even happens, which I think there is a highly likely chance that it won't, because they don't have to. The only leverage that these Democrats had was that they had filibuster power at this particular juncture of the spending bill. This was the only hurdle that Republicans had to clear. So now that Democrats have caved on this, there's no way for them to reassert that leverage. Until January 31st, what are you referring to specifically? It's a vote on extending the Affordable Care Act. So in other words, what that means is that those credits are not going to be extended. Almost certainly not. I cannot even imagine a scenario where in a Republican-controlled Senate and House, those Affordable Care Act subsidies get extended other than as a function of these exact negotiations. So I don't see any way that that's actually going to get voted through. The only benefit of this quote-unquote deal is that Republicans are going to have to go on the record about that. Again, that's if a vote even happens, which Republicans are not bound to. There could be, for some reason, some logic that people in the Senate, these senators, felt that Republicans are going to be bound to that promise. But we've been here before. We've seen this movie before. They're not going to do it. Democrats have handed all of the power back to the United States Congress. Flipped. So yeah, Tim Kaine, this legislation will protect federal workers from baseless firings. It's not true. Reinstate those who have been wrongfully terminated. That is true. And ensure federal workers receive back pay. May be true. As required by a law passed in 2019. So they have now made this about federal workers. What that means is that Trump's utilizing of that leverage won. It's good that they forced them to specify that they were going to reinstate these workers and give them back pay. That's an example of like what good could have come out of this deal. Except again, all it is a reversal of what Trump had done. So it doesn't accomplish anything. And someone else pointed out that Democrats have put themselves in a position by caving on this. It now just makes it look like they were the ones responsible for the shutdown, whereas before Republicans were being blamed for it. So a lot of people are now saying that it's time for Chuck Schumer to go, that Chuck Schumer needs to resign. Ro Khanna has called for Chuck Schumer to resign. And I'm seeing a lot more people on the sort of normie Democrat side of things that are, pissed off about this. And people are not buying this idea that Chuck Schumer voted no, but all these other Democrats just went rogue and voted for it. Obviously, that's not how this works. So this is Chuck Schumer's plan. If Chuck Schumer didn't want this to happen, it wouldn't have happened. And so the base is upset about this. People were animated about this shutdown, and people viewed it as one of the only ways for the opposition to Trump to have a little bit of an outlet and to exercise some power over him. And that's gone now. And Democrats are probably not going to get another shot at that. There might be some other way as a result of this negotiation, as it continues and they do this Affordable Care Act vote, blah, 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 blah. There's also something vague in there about bringing a health care vote of the Democrats choosing to the floor. So Republicans have agreed that they will hold a vote on a healthcare issue that Democrats can decide on. That is a non-binding promise. Once again, probably something that they won't do. But it's also just oddly vague terminology to say, because it's not even in the bill. That's more of like literally a pinky promise between the senators. But the idea is that a healthcare vote will happen at some point. So that's separate from the Affordable Care Act thing. Where's Boudica? Yes. That's separate from the Affordable Care Act thing. Probably the Affordable Care Act subsidies vote is more likely to happen. This idea that some kind of magical, mystical healthcare vote that Democrats get to choose is going to happen at some point. I don't know. I find unlikely, but we'll see. The reality is none of it fucking matters because Republicans still control everything. So any vote that happens is not going to go the Democrats' way. The only thing that they could possibly hope to get out of it is to have a list of Republicans who have voted against these things and to use that against them. But that isn't, frankly, it's really not something that Democrats are all that good at, especially when it comes to these like super detailed healthcare questions. If that stuff mattered as much as Democrats want it to, Democrats would kill Republicans in every election, but that's not what happens. Obviously, the detail-oriented stuff about who's voting this or that on healthcare is not the stuff that animates voters, and that's like one of the primary problems that Democrats have. That's why they were in a good position when it comes to this shutdown, because people couldn't really be bothered about the details, but they knew that the Trump administration was overstepping and failing to deliver on some key promises, and so they recognized the shutdown as a symptom of that. And caving like this, I think, is inexcusable and is going to lead to some primaries. We have several years before some of these people are up for re-election. I would like to see in the 2026 cycle, this midterm cycle, I would like to see some kind of mechanism to force Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries out of leadership and replace them with somebody else. I'm not really sure exactly how that would work. But, I mean, the Republicans have done this over and over again. If they get mad enough about the people who are running the show, they can absolutely kick them out. The only person who wasn't facing that type of pressure was Mitch McConnell, and that's because he was running that shit with an iron fist. But the House leaders, they've gone through like 3 or 4 in the course of the Trump era, since he became president first time. So in this next election cycle, somewhere in there, it is possible for there to be a procedural vote on who's going to be the speaker and who's going to be the Senate leader. And I think that it is time for progressives to seize on that and start formulating a plan about what it looks like to actually kick these guys out of power. Because Chuck Schumer's not up for a primary anytime soon. That's not necessarily in the cards. Like, was it 2028 or? I believe he's up in 2028. But regardless, I think that a conversation needs to be had about not just trying to pressure Chuck Schumer to resign. That's another thing. I mean, if Chuck Schumer resigns, then the conversation about how to replace him would happen. But no Republicans like Mitch McConnell. Yeah, but he was the leader of the Senate. Nobody challenged his leadership of the Senate. And Republicans did like him quite a lot because he achieved a lot. He blockaded Obama's presidency, and then he cleared the way for Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett to be put on the Supreme Court in a way that subverted Obama's right to install a Supreme Court justice. And so, Mitch McConnell's manipulation of the way that the Senate works, including when he was in the minority party, is part of the reason that politics looks the way it does today, and why politics has been reshaped so much in favor of Republicans, even though their policies are enormously unpopular. In many ways, Chuck Schumer preserved the minority rule principle that kind of helps the Senate operate, and that is why he's very much liked by just the establishment of America, regardless of party. And that's why you see Democrats capitulating to the Republicans often. U.S. become the 11th province of Canada. You got a point. I think you might be onto something. But so yeah, we got to start talking about what the process looks like to get some of these guys out of power. It's very possible that Chuck Schumer could be pressured to resign. He doesn't seem like he has any intention of doing that. I remember when Force the Vote happened. Some of you guys in chat will probably remember this. I know that people's feelings about Force the Vote are not fond, and that's because of Jimmy Dore, and I'm not a fan of Jimmy Dore at all. But the thing that was good about Force the Vote is that it seized on a very specific moment within the House where there was a vote happening about who was going to be the speaker. And what the people pushing Force the Vote recognized was that that was a moment where political pressure could be effectively applied through people like AOC. So the instinct to pressure someone like AOC to do something disruptive in that moment and to use her vote for Nancy Pelosi as speaker as leverage to get Nancy Pelosi or the party at large to do something that she wanted them to do, that was correct. It was correct. It was a correct observation that was doable at that moment. So I think it's time to start thinking that way again. Again, like sans anything related to Jimmy Dore. I'm not interested in him as a figure. I know that he corrupted that political play as a project because he's just kind of a corrupt and unhinged person. But that I've always said that the procedural nature of that. Hi, Amira, I miss you, baby. The procedural nature of that demand and that political movement was exactly the way that people on the left should be thinking. How can we seize on these sort of procedural things that happen, these votes that do come up? It's the same concept as a primary. If you sleep through the primary, then you're not going to be able to get some of these more establishment figures out of politics and replace them with somebody else. If you're paying close attention to those processes of who's up for a primary, who is vulnerable, who is not, and when the votes for who's going to be leading the party happen, then you can seize on those moments and utilize whatever political pressure that you have. And so let me see if I can find I feel like this happens every turnover. In other words, it would happen in 2026, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah, so it looks like the next time that there's a round, so probably after this next cycle of elections where we're going to know, who won the House, etc. That is when this vote is going to happen again about who is going to lead the party. So people's eyes need to be on that, as well as the idea of, who's up for primary and can we primary Chuck Schumer, etc. That vote can be utilized in order to pressure some of these guys out and get some fighters. And the base is primed for that. The base wants that. And the base wants new leadership. The base wants people that are not going to fold in a fight like this. And I think people broadly understand that Democrats are failing. This is an opportunity for Democrats to fight Trump, and I think the average person, the average voter out there recognizes it as that. So the fact that Democrats have ceded that fight, like I said, it's mostly probably due to the filibuster. Democrats were probably terrified about the idea of Republicans getting rid of the filibuster, and there is an argument for that because procedurally, the filibuster is the only leverage Democrats have at all. It's the only reason they had leverage in this moment. So if Republicans did end up getting rid of that, Cadillac sent 10 more memberships. Thank you so much, Cadillac. The reason Democrats, found this point where they had some leverage is because it's written into the rules that their consent has to be given unless, Republicans were to have a 60-person majority, 60-seat majority. Then you got to get a few Democrats on board in order to pass certain things, like these yearly spending bills. So if Republicans were to get rid of that, that would mean that Democratic leverage would never come back around again. Cadillac is the best. We love you so much, Cadillac. Really appreciate you. Major contributor. So the fight right now, I think needs to focus on Chuck Schumer, and probably as a result of Boudica didn't get one. I'm sorry. I'm honestly not really sure how it decides that. Like, are those my most active members? I don't recognize many of the names there. Brady Caldwell, I think I recognize. Yeah, sorry about that, Boudica. I don't really know how it decides who gets one. But so Hakeem Jeffries, like I said, came out against this and seems like he was in a little bit more of a fighting posture. That, once again, that could just be a sort of smoke and mirrors type of game because Hakeem Jeffries has been in lockstep with Chuck Schumer this whole time. You can buy one. If you go to my channel, there should be a button to join near where the subscription button is. And they try to make that pretty easy, so there should be. If you have trouble finding that, let me know. Yeah, I think it should just be on my channel. There should be a join button somewhere. Soylent Green. Soylent Bacon. Drew Tex in my chat talking about some bullshit right now. So, Hakeem Jeffries, here's what I'm saying. Hakeem Jeffries, I think, is more vulnerable. He's more vulnerable to a primary, especially in this next cycle. There's already talk that an associate of Zohran Mamdani's might primary him, which has been cause for sort of right-wing media to try to sow some discord between them. In other words, that's a real threat. It's a real threat to the sort of establishment stability of the U.S. Congress if Hakeem Jeffries were to be primaried, and it's very likely that things will go in that direction. So probably the reason that he was able to come out as being against this is because they don't want him to be vulnerable to being primaried, whereas Chuck Schumer's a little bit less vulnerable to that at the current moment. I think it's the opposite. I think, honestly, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries both kind of saved their own skin at everybody else's expense. Really, it's these centrist Democrats who voted for this that threw themselves under the bus. It's just a little bit more glaringly obvious that Chuck Schumer is responsible for it. Whereas in the case of Jeffries, he didn't really have much say in this, and he came out and said, we're going to fight this in the House, but the House can't really do anything. So that's what this comes down to. All the leverage was in the hands of Chuck Schumer, and if he didn't want these Democrats to come out and make this negotiation, then they wouldn't have. So the fact that they did means obviously they were the ones who were behind that. Yeah, is that working well, Amira? You like it? Did I have music in the background, you think? I forgot about that part. This is my first time doing it live like this. Do you guys like it? Feels like a vibe. Seems like we vibing out here. So, let me look into this Jeffries primary situation. People are saying AOC should primary Chuck Schumer, all of that. And she very well might, but that's not going to be for a little while. Whereas Jeffries, I think, is more vulnerable to a primary in this next round here in 2026. Base needs a mullet. Well, there is a mullet, but it's just going down the back there, so you can't see it. So Chuck Schumer has dismissed the idea that it's a serious question about Ose. I think that's how you say his name, Ose. Oh yeah, Ose. Run against Jeffries. So Ase has been talking with Zoran and other people privately about potentially primarying him, doing this primary election. And he might. There's some reporting that Zoran didn't want him to do that, or kind of like put the kibosh on that. I don't know if that's true. That's coming from like New York Post and stuff, and it seems like what they want is to just sow some discord in the Zoran Mamdani coalition to whatever extent that exists. So I would say that's probably mostly what's going on there. But that could be an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on, because you've got Zoran Mamdani, who is this obvious renegade figure. But as of right now, until further notice, he's going to want to not put himself too much at odds, with the Democratic Party. Kibosh means like to kill it. Put the kibosh on something means to dead it. AOC as Newsom's vice president, I gotta say I don't like that at all. I don't think Newsom should be anywhere near presidency. He's exactly the type of Democrat who should not be running. He's a little bit better than somebody like Chuck Schumer, a little bit more bold in his use of power, but not the type of Democrat that we should be upholding as the future of the party, in my opinion. And so with this dynamic with Mamdani and Ase, Mamdani has to look for now like he's not actively antagonizing other Democrats. That dynamic could change, because if they cause problems for him, I imagine he's not going to be too sheepish about letting that be known and putting pressure on Democrats and letting his feelings be known about it. I think that's what we are kind of expecting from Mamdani, and I hope we get it. But there's this sense that if this guy Ase wants to run against Jeffries, that could cause discord in the party. So Mamdani looking like he's openly backing that right now could be a problem. And it's possible that he is trying to squash the talk about that so that it doesn't get in the way of some of the things that he is trying to do. Yeah, sometimes they call him Gavin Newsome, Amira. He kind of deserves that title, to be honest. He's just power hungry. The thing I like about him is that he's willing to use power, and he's willing to like actually do things and be a little bit more bold. But he's kind of a psycho. Not really somebody I trust. So, we'll see. News, Gavin Newsom. Yeah, Newsom is not a progressive. I could see Tim Walz running. I don't know if I would like to see President Tim Walz. I think that his executive record when it comes to running Minnesota has been mostly good. Not flawless, but mostly good. And so he is the type of Democrat that I can see leading the party. He has some things to answer for, though. I'm curious about what his relationship is with AIPAC and Israel, because he gave one of the most insane answers on Israel that I've ever heard at the debate when he debated Vance and the issue of Israel came up. He said something like, the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an imperative to the United States. The expansion, those were his exact words. You can look that up. The expansion of Israel and its proxies is an imperative to the United States. That's an insane thing to say. I've never heard any Democrat say that. The expansion of Israel and its proxies? What? That's turbo Zionist shit. So I don't know where that came from or why he said that, but that is a huge issue for me. Yeah, some people are saying Kyle Kalinske could run and potentially move the conversation to the right, to the left. I think that's probably true. I think, honestly, running like that, going through a primary, doing an actual race, such a brutal process in terms of people drudging up anything they can to try to tear you down. A lot of the stuff that Kyle has out there, like, old tweets or whatever, obviously that would come up. Most of it's already pretty public, so I don't think most people would care that much. But I don't know, it would be pretty brutal. I don't know if he would end up wanting to go through with that. And that's kind of what he said about it, is that, like, me and Crystal like our life. We don't really feel like we want to run for office, but it's kind of starting to feel like we have to. We're certainly in an era where anybody who's progressive could, step into it, put their thumb on the scale and run in a primary race and have a meaningful impact on the conversation. So, you're going to take a bubble bath? Okay, Amira, have fun. Text me. Any progressive can run and meaningfully impact the conversation. But, whether that means Kyle would do a good job, I don't know. I mean, he's a YouTuber. He has a huge fucking audience. There's no doubt about that. Sometimes these audiences are more sequestered than we think they are, and more marginal than we tend to think as people who engage in these communities. But I think Kyle knows that, and I think he also is probably looking at his analytics and he's saying, man, I reach millions of people a month. Millions. So, bye, Amira. I love you. So, it's not inconceivable that he could make an impact on a race like that. I don't know if that's the path for him. Maybe it is. Maybe the fact that, progressives like him are always screeching from the outside is what makes it all feels so ineffectual, whereas, actually running in a race could have a more tangible effect. It's possible. It would be exhausting. It would be indebting and, not necessarily something that I, as a fan of Kyle Kalinske, want to see him put himself through. There's probably better candidates, to be perfectly honest with you. But, if he feels like he wants to do it, I think he's correct that he has the flair and the command of language
that he could make a meaningful impact on the race. There's also a very good chance that he could get smacked down by circumstances of one kind or another. You know, just because he speaks a rhetoric that is cutting when it comes to like the establishment Democrats, you know, doesn't mean that he's going to be able to gather the support needed to beat them. Especially somebody like Gavin Newsom, you know. But maybe, and that would be cool to see. But you know, it does seem like there's a little bit more of a sense these days when it comes to the left flank of the party of like people just kind of being like, well, I think I have to do this. You know what I mean? Like, not I want power and I want to be, you know, lauded, but it seems like somebody's got to fucking do this, and it might as well be me. And I do think that's what government service is supposed to be about. So I can respect that. What did you say? Kyle reported in 2018, Saudi billionaire tweeted 9/11 theme threat. The mainstream media washed it 15 minutes. Yeah, I mean, I remember that threat. I don't know what point you're making, though. True Tech. Yeah, it would be awesome to see Kyle on the debate stage. There's no question. I honestly don't know if he would make it to that point, is what I'm saying. It takes so much money to run a fucking election, and so much could go wrong. And as good as Kyle is verbally, I do think he's probably more vulnerable to, you know, the type of stuff that sinks people in elections than he might think. I'm sure he's aware of that. That's probably what he's thinking about. But also that type of stuff seems to matter less. You know, the bases on both sides seem a lot less interested in like political scandals and, oh, this person said this thing wrong and did that, you know, one time and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't seem to be as operative in these elections. You can look at Jay Jones, who just won. I don't remember where he was running at. And Graham Plattner still has a lot of support. So, you know, these political scandals are not really doing the trick like they used to. And with a guy like with Kyle, if the hungry tweet is the only thing that they have or would have, then yeah, he could probably survive that. But my sense is that a guy like him, reputation-wise, is probably better off avoiding the, you know, election cycle headache. Kyle is ass. Yeah, True Tech. I don't really get what the hell you're talking about. I think more so than president, people like Kyle Kalinske can have a meaningful impact on what happens in the midterms next year. And I think more people are paying attention to that than ever have been before. And so that to me is hopeful. And I think that should be more so the focus. Like, how do we change the makeup of the Democratic Party within the next couple years before we start talking about who's going to run for president? Even though, because we have made some serious progress on changing the dynamic of the Democratic Party. There's a lot of ground to still be covered, and probably it won't be a total victory. There's probably always going to be the type of Democrats in the party that we now consider to be establishment curmudgeons. There's just going to be districts in America that vote people like that in. But we can definitely make it a more worker-focused party in the next year or two. And I think that's probably more so what Kyle and people like him are going to be focused on. And that's, I think, where his audience and clout is best utilized, in my opinion. I'm on the left, Ziggy. I'm unabashedly on the left. I'm to the left of Democrats. I'm not, you know, all the way far left, although I flirt with those type of ideas sometimes in terms of like decolonization, definitely anti-capitalist in general. But, you know, I'm enough of an optimist, I guess, that I want to believe that there's a way that the American structure of government can be transformed into something better rather than the idea of regressing to some kind of like decolonized state.
So, I'm to the left of Democrats, but not as far left as it goes. Who would I prefer to run for office? I don't know. People have been asking me this lately, man. I don't really know that I have an answer. I mean, Tim Walz is a decent choice. We got to get a little closer. A lot of people are, base level excited about somebody like AOC. I don't really share that excitement. I don't think AOC is the person for the job necessarily. If she starts running an excellent campaign, I would support her. I have questions. I don't think that her political posture over the last couple of years, to me, says this is the person who's going to run the country. Bernie Sanders, a younger version of Bernie Sanders, would be my answer. So that's why I say like Tim Walz is close for me. But there are others. There are better candidates than that. So I hope a Zoran-like figure can emerge in the next couple of years that will completely change the dynamic of politics, which is what Zoran has done. It's what grassroots progressive candidates have the ability to do, is, come out of nowhere and completely change the conversation. And so I think that's the political dynamic that's going to take us in the right direction. It's not like, oh, let's pick some governor who's in the Democratic Party and have them run. I mean, maybe that's the answer, but I don't think we're going to get anything that different from what we've been getting out of somebody like that. Again, maybe with the exception of Tim Walz, but that's not for sure. Do I think Democrats expected the blowback? Some of the centrist Democrats are mad. Yeah, that's what I was noting. It does seem like the centrists are more upset about this than I would have expected. I think they knew, though. I think that's why Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries both gave themselves an out and made sure that this was done in a way where they could say they're against it, because they knew that not only was there going to be blowback, but that people were going to be talking about primaries as a result. It's possible they didn't expect, that to be such a broad conclusion, because, yeah, I'm seeing people like Brian Tyler Cohen, who's like literally taking dark money from Democrat affiliated dark money sources. And he's talking about a robust primary season. So it's possible they overestimated. I think it's more likely that they felt that the filibuster thing was existential enough that they wanted to get this deal done in order to avoid that. I don't think AOC is a ticket killer, but I think maybe people overestimate a little bit how well she would perform. It just depends. I mean, I think she's capable of running an incredible campaign, but the hate for her is strong. And I don't know. It seems to me that she doesn't want to expose herself to that. I think that a lot of things about politics have shaken her a little bit. And I don't say that to her discredit, because I think it would any normal person. Living through January 6th and having that turn into such a thing where it's like, at the time she felt threatened, but because she wasn't directly in the main building, all of a sudden everything she said about it was a lie. So she's feeling like, the person who's showing up there to like lead her to safety might be somebody who actually wants to do her harm. She's terrified for her life. These are people who make, all kinds of horrible jokes about her of the worst kind that you can imagine. And then they call her a liar because she says that she was scared on January 6th. And, it just seems like exposing herself to the level of misogyny and outright, racist hatred that she has already received. Seems like she just isn't so much up for that. And I honestly don't blame her for it. Yeah, I agree with you, Boudica. I think AOC could definitely win the Senate. But the presidency, I'm not so sure. I'd like to think so. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a President AOC. I share some of the skepticism of her that some people, most specifically on the left, feel. I think that she's been a little bit more of an institutionalist than she ran as. And that makes me wonder about what type of president she would be if she was to run for president. Maybe a little bit too susceptible to the politics as usual, based on the kind of political figure that she presented herself as, which was somebody who's going to be completely resistant to that. And same thing with Zohran Mamdani. We're going to see how resistant is he to the kind of entrenched establishment politics that he ran against, because AOC very much ran against that same sort of thing, and in my opinion has not done a great job of being the renegade that she sold herself as. So to me, that doesn't say president. I don't see a president in that. And yeah, the Israeli weapon supply, she's done that a few times. And it's always in a case where it's like this so-called defensive spending, to which the response is that, funding any of Israel's military spending at all is just defense of a colonial project. And especially considering that in, I think, none of these cases would her vote have been decisive. The fact that she is voting in favor of that signals a support for Israel that people on the left, especially now, frankly, just don't want to see. I think she's smart enough to realize that. And it seems to me that there was a point early on, where, she got into it with Nancy Pelosi on the House floor about, I believe, an Iron Dome vote. I believe that famous moment where Nancy Pelosi can be seen kind of admonishing her on the House floor, and then she's like crying afterwards, but she ended up voting. I think she ended up voting present instead of no, or maybe she voted yes. I'm not sure. I believe that was an Iron Dome vote. And so that has characterized, that was not just a one-time thing. She has then, ever since then, continuously voted yes or present on those bills or additions to bills when they come up. And so that's the puzzling thing. What is it that happened in that conversation with Nancy Pelosi that changed the trajectory of AOC's political career in that way? That's what I'm curious about, because AOC has never taken AIPAC money. She's not funded by them, but some of her votes, not all of them, but some of her votes would kind of give you that suspicion of like, what exactly are her interests here? Because she doesn't have to vote for these bills. But it seems like in that instance, Nancy Pelosi kind of forced her hand. And ever since then, she has toed the line on it. And I don't really understand what that's about. But it just seems like, institutionalist calculus to me. Nancy May should not run for president. Okay. Both of the upcoming tickets are not going to look good. I think that there's a chance that the Democratic ticket could be a real powerhouse, but just depends on how able the Democratic base is to push back past the establishment wing. It seems clear to me that they want to at this point. The Democratic base is smart enough to know that going with the safe option of Joe Biden in 2020 led to just unthinkable political ramifications. The political ramifications of that decision are staggering. And, I think the base is sick of that. I think even the parts of the base that are still sympathetic to different Democrat centrist messaging still know at the end of the day that the party keeps doing this, forcing these establishment candidates on us, and it just keeps being a bad idea. Even in the case where they won with Joe Biden, and I do give him credit for that win, it led to a spectacular downfall in the Democratic Party, which could have been avoided. But they also, it's just entrenched power. It's a structure of entrenched power. And then once they got that establishment candidate in there, they didn't want to try to oppose his power at all until the last minute. Jasmine Crockett, I think, is okay, but any Democrat who wants to gain serious momentum, I think is going to have to be pretty upfront about being anti-Israel and not taking AIPAC money and that sort of thing. Like, it's just going to have to be a part of your platform, especially amongst the left. The left is not going to rally around anybody that is not willing to do that. So that's my concern with Jasmine Crockett. I think she's a great communicator, but she has not distanced herself from the establishment structure of the Democratic Party in that way as of right now. So to me, that kind of counts her out. I think she's fine. I think it's good to have her, calling Trump a dumb bitch or whatever. But, any Democrat who wants to really have the sauce, you got to say the words, "I will not take money from AIPAC," period. I think that's going to be the defining sentence for Democrats in this next election cycle. Yeah, Rashida Tlaib has no chance in a national race. I agree with that. Jasmine for Speaker of the House, maybe. Yeah, I agree that having Tim involved in the ticket, I think Mossad and CIA have nefarious intentions. I mean, the obvious answer is yes, but it depends on what you mean. Like, nefarious in terms of who? I think they have nefarious intentions to protect the ruling and political class of Israel and America. I would count that as nefarious intentions. So yes, but I don't think their motivations are that much more insidious than that. They're trying to protect the American and Israeli political class, the elite class. That's what they do. I consider that nefarious intentions. So Ziggy, you like Tim Walz? What do you like about Tim Walz? Jeremy CIA in my chat. Did I just fucking put myself on the list? Capital T, capital L. I think defense of Ukraine is correct. I think people who are skeptical of this idea of continuing to fund Ukraine indefinitely and America, getting involved in essentially an endless war. I respect people's skepticism of that. I'm not in favor of withdrawing support. I think we should withdraw support for Israel and maintain support of Ukraine. I think my main issue with it is that is inconsistent. If we're going to defend Ukraine because they're the smaller, victim of a colonial imperial power imposing its military might on them, and we're going to fund them to the tune of billions of dollars so that they don't fall to Russia, but then we're going to fund the opposite side of the war in the Middle East and give the authoritarian government that is bullying a smaller nation out of existence, we're just going to give them billions of dollars. To me, that completely contradicts, it just makes it impossible for America to say that we have any type of moral standing, that it has nothing to do with that. It's obviously about political strategy, right? Like the regions of Ukraine and our relationship with Israel is of a strategic benefit to the United States. So that's ultimately why we're doing it. That's why Trump ran against funding the Ukraine war, and then now he's in office and he's doing exactly what Biden was doing, because the people behind the scenes are coming to him and saying, look, we can abandon Ukraine, but if we do, Russia's going to be a fucking problem. They just are. And there are resources that are tied up in Ukraine that the Americans benefit from. And so if we abandon them, it's just going to change our leverage on the international stage. It's going to. And so Trump says, okay, well, fuck it. Because it's better to invest billions of dollars than to, potentially lose a major portion of the next century because you allowed Russia to amass too much power and you allowed Russia access to the resources in Ukraine that have allowed Ukraine to become a sovereign nation in the first place, right? There's a reason that Russia wants that land, and it's not just because it wants to reunite the Soviet Union or whatever people say. It's because of resources, because taking Ukraine back would make Russia more powerful and allow it to continue reestablishing itself as a world power. And, just from a straightforward strategic hegemonic perspective, that's bad for the United States. So that's why any U.S. president would do the same thing that Trump or Biden has done. I think for the most part, it's the right thing. But, I would agree that there needs to be some kind of like idea of where we're going with all of this. You like Tim Walz because he has the balls to do what is right for the people he represents. Well, and he's done like really good establishment of programs, funding programs, and making progress in that state to progressive ends, which is, I think, what we need to see in the Democratic Party. Like, I don't care about the political muck. I don't care about naysayers. I don't care about billionaires who are opposed to something. Americans need healthcare, so we are going to establish healthcare, period. It's another thing I will give Gavin Newsom credit for. Is that there is a public option in California. He has said that he wants to push for universal health care. He's not been able to do that politically, or maybe he doesn't actually support it. But proxy war with Venezuela just to seize the 303 billion barrels of oil. Yeah, but also it's the continuation of what America's policy always is, which is to take any government that is not overtly capitalist, any government that does not welcome American capitalist investment, and topple it and replace it with something that will welcome American capitalist investment. I think that's mostly what it's about. But yeah, you could also say that it has to do with the oil. And I mean, I don't think Maduro's great either, but it is interesting how these narratives change about who is an authoritarian and who is not. Tim Walz seems to be a liberal in the classic sense. Freedom of choice for women and people identify differently without forcing speech laws like extremists. I think that's for the most part. What you described is pretty much the Democrat position. There's really nobody that I can think of that goes against the things you're saying in the Democratic Party. The difference between Tim Walz and other Democrats would be that Tim Walz is actually, like, when he says that, healthcare is a right for Minnesotans, he actually establishes a system where Minnesotans can get healthcare, and other, welfare systems, etc. And so that's the thing that other Democrats are sheepish about and they drag their feet on. So the reason Tim Walz has a better record in Minnesota than a lot of Democrats is because he has more balls and just more, maybe it's the political situation in Minnesota as well that just allows for certain progress to be made. But I think Tim is more sellable as a Democrat, and that's your opinion as a conservative. I agree with that. But he was pretty. The Republicans targeted him pretty hard in the election. You don't think that those type of attacks, tampon Tim and that sort of thing, would kill his chances in a general, at least among Republicans, amongst the sentiment of Republicans? Yeah, I think defending Ukraine was the right thing to do. And there's even a moralistic argument to be made. This is a smaller nation that's being bullied by a bigger nation that's already an enemy of the United States, and we can't stand for that. But America ruined its ability to take that stance by funding the genocide in Gaza. Two parties in the USA, Democratic and autocratic. That's true. That's maybe a good thing to start saying. How do we prevent Trump from warring with Nigeria and Venezuela? I don't know that we do, to be perfectly honest with you. It's one of the
places where Trump has the most power to wield, wield his power however he wants. He's supposed to have to go through Congress for these things, but this current Congress is letting him do whatever he wants. And so if he wants to go to war with Venezuela, he's going to do it. I mean, there were huge protests against the Iraq war leading up to it and after it happened, and none of it stopped it. I mean, when the apparatus of the United States decides that we're going to go to war with somebody, it's incredibly hard to stop that. I would say, this next cycle of elections, Trump can't wage an entire war with Venezuela in the course of a year. So if Democrats win big in the next cycle of elections, that's going to go a long way to stop the ability of Trump to go to war with whoever he wants. If they don't, and Republicans retain the Senate in particular, then Trump's going to be able to continue waging war. So that's a very important point to say to people, because a lot of times when Republicans win, it's because, especially when Trump's involved, it's because they're able to cast the Democrats as the pro-war party. And that's partially what happened in this recent election. And so in the 2024 election. So if voters get the sense that to vote for Trump or to vote for Democrats or Republicans is going to, be a vote for war with Venezuela, then they probably won't vote for Republicans, and that will help tamp down Trump's imperial ambitions. But if Republicans are rewarded in the midterms, even by just scraping on and holding on to their Senate majority, then Trump will probably continue doing what he's doing. What's up, Magic Cat? I've heard that Columbus was a diddly creeper. True, I have no idea what you're talking about. I guess I understand you on that last one. But some people like to come into chat and just really give me their whole colorful worldview. And it has no connection to anything I'm saying at all. Unfortunately, I don't see the Dems taking the Senate. They certainly could, but it's a more uphill battle for sure than what's up, Schwartz? I haven't seen you in the live streams very much, man. What's up? Good to have you. Luntha, good to see you. Governments collapsing completely or falling into some form of authoritarianism is inevitable. The question is, how long do we delay it? I would like to delay it for at least 100 years. That's one way to put it. But if you believe that, then at a certain point, delaying it becomes impossible. I don't know that I believe that governments will inevitably fall into authoritarianism, although I certainly understand why you would say that. But no, I think it's more just that it's an incredibly hard thing to prevent, and authoritarians are very much willing to use democracy to get into a position where they can take it away. And, that's just it's a permanent problem that is faced in democracies, especially because democracies tend to be clunky and bureaucratic and slow moving. And so when there are fast moving, intense problems that many people are well aware of, they become a little bit more willing to vote for somebody who, contradicts the democratic principles of that system. And you even see that happening in the Democratic Party. Part of the push for leadership that breaks through the establishment muck is leadership that's going to say, I don't give a fuck about every procedural vote and every, protection that the Senate is protecting to make sure that the House doesn't go too far. People are sick of that shit, right? And some of these things are genuinely put in place to create some kind of balance of power in the United States. Although in the case of the Senate, I would say that's mostly to preserve minority rule. Like I said, that's mostly the function of the Senate. But, it's like the desire is for a leader who's able to move a little bit faster and make things move faster. And so I think the balance between having the ability to have quick moving leadership while also having a robust and balanced democracy, to me, that's the challenge, more so than that any system would teeter towards authoritarianism. Although, I guess in some ways we're kind of making the same point. I'm from Germany, and for us, the American flag, since I was born, sign for freedom, democracy, and progress. Mathis, what do you think the American flag is a sign of now? AOC as vice president, but my ideal would be Tim and Sanders. That would be a hell of an old white man ticket, which could maybe win in America, but I don't know. I think Democrats, the thing you got to think about too, while I get what you're saying about being a Republican, Ziggy, Democrats have to pick somebody that's going to win with Democrats. And so I think while in a sense Tim Walz and Bernie Sanders would be a good choice politically, the problem there is that there are large parts of the base that are definitely frustrated with this idea of like old white men running everything, which is why Biden went with Kamala Harris as his vice in 2020. I honestly to this day, I think that was a good choice. There was probably somebody better he could have went with, but I think that, choosing a younger, non-white, non-man was a smart choice on a Democratic ticket. I get that that's not the kind of thing Republicans tend to think the opposite way. They'd be more comfortable voting for two white men on a ticket, but that doesn't tend to be how Democrats think, and certainly not people further left than that. The Electoral College vote allows the minority to dictate what happens to the major. Yeah, and not to mention the fact that that's sort of what the Senate is there for. The Senate is there to make sure that the democratic process of the House of Representatives is slowed down by something that represents the sort of property-owning class. And I mean, that essentially is what makes up the system of America. Is, you have these systems of democracy, but then you also have these very regressive bureaucratic systems that are meant to protect those in power, and that's really what the fight is about. You could make an argument for abolishing the Senate altogether because it slows down our political progress as a nation. It would also make for, scarier results. It would make it so that whatever party won, whatever people are in charge, are able to do more with their power, which is something that as a democracy you kind of have to be a little bit allergic to. But I do think there's a real argument for the fact that as long as we're going to have representatives, I think we should get rid of representatives altogether and just do direct democracy. But I don't think that could ever happen under the current constitution that we have in America. What do I think about the single transferable vote system? What is that, Tim Lopez? I don't know what that is. Hope we've not let you guys down since stopping the USSR from completely destroying all your freedoms. I mean, the USSR, Ziggy, arguably saved Germany from, and the rest of the world from Hitler and the Nazis. So are you making an argument about what happens after that? Because America certainly would not have beat the Nazis if it wasn't for, hey, Boudica's a member, what up? Yeah, America almost definitely would not have beat the Nazis if it wasn't for the Soviets. Schwartz, this is a resurgence of the old Confederacy. They're sabotaging the pieces of the country that create an egalitarian society, gumming up the system as part of that strategy. I agree with you. The system's already pretty gummed up, though. Democrats are feckless because they're trying to manage a post-war consensus that was on life support in the 90s and died in the 2000s. Not to mention the fact that we had a whole other war since then. Most people just see Trump and no one likes him because of the things he does. And it's crazy that we voted for Trump once, right? Like, Mathis, I assume the first time you guys were like, oh, wow, this is fucked up. But the second time Trump's back in power, it's like, okay, this is just what America is then. What is that? STV voting. Single transferable vote system? What is that? Is that like rank? That's not ranked choice, is it? I just have membership. I'm thinking about starting a Patreon, but I would have to transfer a lot of stuff over, I think, or just, I don't know. I would figure out exactly what I would want to do with that. But that's partially why I'm trying different things right now, like with the live streams, and I'm doing like freestyles on live stream now too.
And just, trying different stuff to see what works. But I'm definitely going to keep doing the podcast as it is. I would like to do more members only podcasts, but it's hard for me to find the time to do that. If I was doing this shit more full time, I would have more time to do it. It's a form of it. Can you explain to me how it works? Let me look it up. Yeah, I'm actually streaming this exact same thing on Twitch right now. It's my first time ever doing that. You need to break the two-party system and create a multi-party system using STV. Proportional ranked choice voting. Multi-winner electoral system. Each voter casts a single vote in the form of a ranked ballot. Have the options to rank candidates. Their votes may be transferred. If they're so that's just ranked choice. So their vote is used to elect someone they prefer. Yeah, no, I'm super in favor of that system. I'm not sure if that's the form of rank. So that's what they have in the New York primary. Is that correct? Age or race, maybe it shouldn't matter, but I mean, it does. I agree with you. It's more about the platform, but like, it matters. If a 16-year-old was running for president, you would have some questions about their age, would you not? Make it a Twitch account, so joining is for free as a Prime TV member. Joining what? Twitch? Like a subscription? I don't even know if I have that set up through Twitch. Hold on, I gotta plug in my computer, folks. Schwartz, do you know what the difference in process is between ranked choice voting and transferable vote? Because I mean, just upon looking at it, it looks pretty much like the process is what they did in New York, but I'm not sure. Warned of a two-party system. Ever been a president who speaks about former administrations like Trump does? I mean, I don't know. I think maybe people focus a little bit too much on stuff like that. I think in most cases you can find other presidents as bad as Trump, but you have to go back pretty far. The question is, has anyone in the modern era spoken the way Trump has about U.S. democracy, about the opposition party, etc.? The answer is no. But, if you go back far enough, you get like actual fucking murderers and like slave owners and abusers and stuff. So like, Trump, he's a departure from modern American politics and civility. But I'd say the further you go back in history, the less of a departure he becomes. Single member districts, the other is for multi-member districts. Single member districts, multi. So you're saying single transferable vote is for multi-member districts, not single member districts? What's my idea of a perfect system? Well, I think I like the idea of direct democracy. I don't like representatives. I think that representatives have failed us in a lot of ways. And in my perception, most of what Americans hate about politics comes from the fact that we have these representatives and they don't really do a good job of representing our interests. I think that transferring to a system where people directly voted on issues, to the extent that that could be managed, which would be seriously challenging, but it's not like we don't have the technology for it. I think a system where people could participate and vote on the issues they cared about most would create a more active and engaged society. So, if there's things happening in the tech world that you know something about, or maybe you don't know that much about, but you care a lot about it, that's something that you can engage in and you can affect what the outcome is. I think it would just create a more direct relationship between the individual citizen and what happens in law, as well as a better relationship between, well, these are the people that voted against this, and here's why. Whereas because of these parties, everything gets kind of ran through this black box of these parties and what they stand for. And so, it creates these weird dynamics. Everything gets tied in together, and everybody's criticizing the same person, but for different reasons. None of it makes sense. The part about that system that would be tough is it wouldn't solve the problem of money in politics. So I think if we had a direct democracy system after having already eliminated money in politics, that would create the most healthy system. But like I said, I think that because of the way the Constitution is written, I'm pretty sure representative democracy is just written into it. So I don't know that there's any way that we could do away with that part of it. But I would love to see a more direct democracy system. Have a good night, Boudica. Appreciate you tapping in and buying the membership. Have a great night. Pretty good human rights in Qatar, huh? Interesting. I think representative democracy would work well on a local scale or small. Might be a challenge. Yeah, it would definitely become difficult on a large scale. Maybe a combination, where it's like on the large scale of U.S. politics, it's ran by representatives. But I think moving away from the idea of representatives would go a long way, because so much of the political process is about this investment in these political figures, and they get all this money, and everything's about them and what decisions they do or don't make. And it just seems to me that that's what everybody fucking hates about politics. But I'm not sure that there are very many examples of societies run in other ways. Run on kinds of checks and balances. I don't even know that the checks and balances are the problem, because I think in many cases the checks and balances work. It's just that they are, or they're pretty well thought out, but they don't work properly because there's too much moneyed interest. And that's what I was saying about the Senate. The Senate kind of exists to protect that moneyed interest. It exists so that the representation of each individual state is going to have an outsized voice towards the property owners in that state versus just the number of people voting. And that's what creates the sort of gerrymandering issues that we see throughout the country. So, I think it's more so that the the system of selection for who serves is the problem. So it's not impossible for me to imagine a system of representation that it works fine. Obviously, you got to get the money, the incentive out of it. But I also think, if in terms of my ideal society, I would like people to just be engaged in the issues that they care most about and be able to have a direct effect on that. And I think that would give people a lot more respect for democracy, because they would be able to rally specifically for issues they care about and see a tangible effect. And if they lose, it's very straightforward why you lost. The interests of the people that voted against a certain issue. Whereas when it's about a person, again, it's this like weird black box that's impossible. You can never really know what someone's intentions are. You never really know what conversations are had behind the closed doors of whatever representative you voted for. And I just think that that's kind of an interminable problem, especially with the amount of money that's in politics. more robust against that kind of capture. See the last question. Sucks me. Why don't the Democrats keep websites we can all go to chat with each other, connecting with those who care about helping, like Trump has through True Social? Because they don't want that. They don't want to create a space that would foment too much opposition to themselves. And so I think they like the system that we currently have. That in order for people to actually make enough noise that they will even hear it, we have to completely overwhelm the systems that exist. They have to be overwhelmed with phone calls and letters and people showing up at their office. Only then do they really start feeling political pressure. And I think they like that. They like that people have to jump through hoops in order to make an effect, because otherwise they would be overwhelmed all the time. And they should be. But that's part of my issue with direct democracy. I wish that energy, that's part of my issue with representative democracy. I wish that energy that goes towards representatives could just go towards the issues that people care about. I think that would be a healthier system, although it would certainly have to be run differently. Direct democracy failed Greece. Caved into a concept of a promise to vote on something in the future. Yeah, so the deal is that in a month, sometime in December, there will be a vote on the Affordable Care Act credits. That vote will not pass. The only benefit of that vote is that it will put some Republicans on the record who vote against it. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Not like Republican voters care about that anyway. So, yeah, it's a promise that they're going to vote on it in the future, and some other promises, and also reinstatement of federal employees that were fired by Trump, and a promise to fund SNAP benefits. So the way I see it, Republicans could renege on every single one of those issues. We'll see if they will. Should I play music during this, you guys think? Be a vibe, right? If we let AI run governance, you so don't want a Logan's Run act to occur. You're just saying a lot of things. Since really racking up the nonsensical statement points. I'm gonna steal your crown. All right. Probably hop off here in a second, guys, because I do want to work on a podcast for tonight. This was a pretty good stream, though. Appreciate you guys coming in to check it out. I think there's a very realistic situation where AI could run the government well, but it would just have to be publicly owned, and not privately owned. Just the sentence that you said is not written well. It doesn't make any sense. I don't get what you're saying. But yeah, I'll probably do a podcast for tonight. Drop it in the morning. Hell yeah, everybody go to bed. Bad things get worse. I think I agree with you. You're saying we shouldn't let AI run government, and I think that's probably true, except I think the main problem is that AI is currently dominated by capital right now. That would be the problem with letting AI run government. I think in the future, 5-10 years down the line, imagining AI systems that could significantly help with governance is not impossible, but it would have to be in a way that doesn't benefit private corporations. Hell yeah, Schwartz, I really appreciate your support, man. I always see you supporting, and I really fuck with you. I'm glad you made it into one of the streams. Now that I figured out this format, I'll probably keep doing it more. I've been doing more live streams, and like I said, live freestyles and stuff. That's where our problems are. Yeah, for sure, man. go to my Instagram. You can find my Instagram in the about section on my channel, and you can send me a DM on there if you want. I think you also can find my email on there if you look for it. Hell yeah, don't dox me. I always appreciate you guys. Just wanted to come on here to talk about this real quick, and I'll drop probably my podcast episode tonight is going to be about it, so I'll get more into the details and be a little bit more collected about my thoughts about it. I haven't seen the movie Logan's Run. I'll have to watch that. Maybe that's why I didn't understand your thing. Hell yeah, Schwartz. I'm dropping a visual for Electricity soon. I know I already have one, but I'm dropping like a live, like more of a music video type thing to it probably at the end of this month. And then I'm going to push that as a single for a while. I'm using OBS right now. This is a combination of assets made in CapCut, many different programs happening here. CapCut, Canva, Krita is what I use to draw the face. I also use different apps to animate. It's this thing called VideoTube Mini is how I get the little face that talks. And then I run that through OBS, and then I stream that to multiple platforms. I'm still messing around with this stuff. This is technology that has existed for like the last 10 years. And I haven't really. Hell yeah, that's awesome, dude. I love to hear that, Schwartz. Thank you. And yeah, definitely gonna keep that one pushing. I'm gonna push that as like a real single too. So it's gonna be out on all streaming platforms soon, and I'm gonna probably give that one a good couple months of like only pushing that. World War II. Yeah, I said something about that. Didn't you say that Russia, that America saved Germany from being crushed by Russia or something like that? My argument was that the USSR arguably saved Germany from the Nazis, and that America probably wouldn't have won that war if it wasn't for the USSR. So you sounded like you were talking about what happened after that, which is maybe arguable. But I would say that the Germans have plenty to thank the USSR for, especially when it comes to World War II, particularly. But all right, I'm going to leave it at that. Billboard 100, here we come. Electricity, number 1. Let's fucking go. Populist takeover of the Billboard charts. That's what the fuck we're talking about. All right. Yeah, Ziggy, if you want to debate me more about that, then pop in some other time. I'm going to go for now. But I appreciate all you guys. Much love. And I'll be back on soon. And we're just going to keep this shit pushing. I don't know how to stop this in stream. Second is actually I know. All right, guys. Love you. Talk to you soon. Dropping a podcast in the morning, so tune in for that. Probably around the usual time, 5:30 a.m. PT. And we'll talk more about the